Hello and welcome everyone to today's session on data visualization and design in Tableau. It is good to be with you. My name is Professor Peter Pinar and I am the Executive Director of the Leaders of Africa Institute. And the Leaders of Africa Institute is again sponsoring this session as we did the session on Tuesday focusing on the platform Data Wrapper. And before I begin, I just want to say a big thank you to Mobile Web Ghana, the organizer for the conference, the African Digital Skills Conference. We've been participating in this conference as the Institute for 3 years, and we're always happy to support Mobile Web Ghana as well as Florence and her team in this wonderful conference. And I bet many of you who are joining us for today's webinar and Zoom session have been in a number of wonderful sessions over the past 2 days, and we are now on the third day, the final day of the conference, and we're so happy that you could join us today for a little bit of design and data visualization in Tableau. So welcome. Today's session is an interactive session, so I want to invite all of you who are here to engage with me in the chat or by raising your hands. I will be watching the chat and engaging with you, and I'll have some questions for you as we go into today's session. And I know that some of you joining us today have been in the previous Data Wrapper session, so you'll know how things are working here at the Institute and here in today's session. So let me share my screen as we get into today's session. So I want to start today by sharing a brief opportunity that I will revisit at the very end of today's session. And I know those of you who joined me for the Data Wrapper session already know this, but every year the Leaders of Africa Institute has a program that is solely focused on data visualization and design in a variety of different platforms. Data Wrapper, today's example of Tableau, Microsoft Power BI, and another platform called Flourish. And we want to encourage you to apply to this program. Applications are now open, and they'll be open through the mid part of January, January 15th to be precise. So I will be sharing some links in the chat, and I'll do that now, where you can learn more about the program and apply there. Again, I'll remind you at the end of today's session, there are some other links that I've also shared to connect with the Leaders of Africa Institute. And again, I'll mention this at the end. You can also join the mailing list and learn about other programs that are focused on data science and tech development at the Institute as well by using the links that I've shared in the chat. So with that opportunity in mind, let's dive in. And I always want to start off with a bit of a discussion about data visualization in general, because we could just get into Tableau and we could start making some beautiful visualizations, but it's important to revisit the context of why data visualization is important and why we spend so much time doing it, and why we see organizations, companies, governments investing a lot of money and time and energy behind data visualization. And there's some 4 interrelated reasons that we could emphasize here. The first thing is we are churning out and creating mass amounts of data. And this is something that we've seen increase exponentially in the last 5 to 10 years. So we got a lot more information than we had, say, 20 or 30 years that we can now use to help inform decision making. Which leads to the second thing, is that we oftentimes want to analyze that a large amount of information to help us make data-driven decisions, right? It's one thing to look at data in a spreadsheet or a basic table. It's another thing to be able to view that data and be able to answer some very basic questions by looking at that visualization, which leads us to the third thing, is that data visualization is an easy way to convey information, right? We could be looking at it in a raw data set, but a raw data set's not going to really tell us much, because we may be able to perceive some patterns just by looking at the rows and the columns and so on and so forth. But data visualization helps us answer the questions very, very quickly. And a good data visualization is going to be a really good guide that's going to guide the audience or the viewer along that story that you're trying to tell with that data. And the final thing is that interpretation point. As much as we can just kind of describe the data, we can also use data visualization to interpret the data to come up with some sort of results or findings. And although we're not going to be focused in this session on the data science aspects of data visualization, that is formulas and codes and models that we may use behind our data visualization, just know that we can use some of those techniques to help us be able to show the data, right? And Tableau, the platform we're going to be working on today, can surely do and aid us in that if you're taking this data visualization project forward. Now, if you're interested in that analysis side of things, I encourage you to apply for the fellowship at the Leaders of Africa Institute, where we do focus on those topics. Now, in data visualization, there are so many different softwares that are out there. In fact, it's almost every year there's a new software that's the new kid on the block. And if you can't hear me, Wisdom, it may be an internet connectivity issue, so I encourage you jump in and out of the session. If others cannot hear me, please let me know in the chat. I'll also be monitoring that. So as I was saying, data visualization softwares are many these days, right? And they're designed for different purposes. We have R and Python. Those are primarily data analytics tools. So those are the tools that many data scientists use to analyze data, but they can also be used to create data visualizations. For instance, using the module in R called R Shiny allows you to create some beautiful data dashboards, similar to what we're going to be creating today in Tableau. Then we have Tableau, which is the focus of today's session. We also have Microsoft Power BI, which comes packaged with a lot of the Microsoft Office Suite programs. So a lot of organizations, institutions, universities use Microsoft Power BI because these come packaged with software that they already are using. So one of the nice things to note about Microsoft Power BI in today's session on Tableau is that many of the things, if not all of the things that we cover in Tableau, can be translated into Microsoft Power BI. So if you're able to get the intuition for how Tableau works, yes, the drop downs and the menus and the positions and the icons of things are different, but the same things that you can do in Tableau, most of them you can do also in Power BI and vice versa. That's why our data and design course teaches you both platforms as well, because they're very similar in many respects. We also have others that are out there. I'm going to assume that many of you have used Excel to create some basic figures. That is data visualization. It may not be a complex data visualization, but that's one form of it. We also have SAS. We have Flourish. Flourish is a platform that has more animated data visualizations that move. Many of you have seen these on social media, for instance. We also have Data Wrapper, which is a wonderful platform if you're publishing reports or online blog posts, or you're publishing in any print medium. That's the platform we covered on Tuesday. It's also a very elegant way of visualizing data. We also have Canva and Infogram. Now, these aren't complex data visualization platforms. They're not going to be connecting to databases and things of this nature, but they are able to create data visualizations of some sort, and particularly a subset of data visualizations, which we would call infographics. So that is where we would see our infographics, Infogram, and Canva, and there are so many other infographic platforms as well. They're not going to do much with the data and as much as we can do in Tableau in today's session, but they are something that we can use as well. So we have a lot of different platforms. So why are we focusing on Tableau today? And why are so many of you here to hear about Tableau? Well, Tableau is a really popular business intelligence visual analytics platform. And I'll emphasize the business analytics. Many of you know that Microsoft Power BI stands for the B, and BI stands for business, because these were designed originally for enterprise businesses. But just because you're not in business, say you're in government, or you work for a nonprofit organization or an NGO or another type of organization that may be out there, a trust, even if these tools are designed for businesses, those other organizations are also using these tools and use them quite effectively, right? Some of the organizations that use them, we use that here at the Leaders of Africa and the Leaders of Africa Institute. You also see Lenovo, Lufthansa, the airline, Nissan, the car company, are all using these platforms. So it runs the gambit. And I know that Mobile Web Ghana and other organizations in Ghana as well have used and have done projects in these platforms as well. And some of the strengths of these platforms that I've alluded to is that it's easy to use. So fairly easy to use. As you get into it, you're going to learn more and more and discover things, and hopefully today's session will open those doors for you. The second thing is you can create some really interactive visualization. In other words, you can allow the audience to engage with your data visualization by doing some basic data work within your data visualization. It's fairly easy to learn, so hopefully by the end of today's session, you're going to be ready to dive into some basic aspects of data visualization in our tutorial. There's no need for hard coding, but you can do hard coding if you need to, but you don't have to. So a lot of things are sort of drop-down menus and tabs and other sort of nice drag and drop features to it, which is great. And another key feature of Tableau, as well as many of these data visualization software, is that it allows for live updating. So you can connect it to databases such as a SQL database, a Google spreadsheet, or other type of online database, so that way when the data comes into your data visualization, it can automatically be reflected in your data visualization. And that is really cool. That means if you've created a data visualization for a certain purpose, you don't have to keep on recreating the figures every time you want to do a report. You can just create a data dashboard or a visualization and then update the data in the back end, and then all of a sudden it reflects in the front end. And so a lot of organizations don't want to keep on creating new figures and going back and then re-exporting and things like that. It just takes so much time. They just want something that updates as new data comes in. And so that's able to happen. And so many of you know about elections and have voted in elections, so on and so forth. You know on election night, a lot of times the data that is coming in real time as the polling centers are releasing their data and the Electoral Commission is confirming it. And then it gets pushed into a data dashboard that everyone can follow the election results, who's winning and where, for instance. So that's an example of live updates. And Tableau can do that as well. Now, there are many faces of Tableau that I want you to be aware of. So Tableau is not just one platform here, but it's actually several platforms in the Tableau family, if you can call it that. The first one is Tableau Desktop. That is the unlimited version of Tableau. It is a paid-for product of Tableau, right? So that has all the full features, unlimited data sources, connection to the cloud, all of that. So organizations can subscribe and engage in that. The second part is Tableau Public, and Tableau Public is free, and that's what we're going to be using today, but you can connect to a limited number of data sources, but you can upload your own data into it, as we'll be doing today, as I'll be sharing some example data for you to use. We also have Tableau Online, which is the cloud version, the cloud-only version of Tableau. We also have Tableau Server and Prep, Tableau Management, and some of these other Tableau versions or modules of Tableau allow you to do more high-end data science analytics in the back end, and also manage your database and shape your data as it's coming in on the back end as well. So there are many different Tableau products that are under the Tableau family. And again, many of these products are paid for, so you're going to need to have an institutional license that will be able to do that. But that said, you also have some free options that you can tap into, and that's what we're going to be doing today as you're going to get set up, hopefully, for yourself. So I want to start off and get to know you a little bit as we get into today's session and get into the tutorial in Tableau. And to do that, what I want you to do is share in the chat a couple of things. I want you to share your name, so your name, and I can see it on Zoom, but just confirm what your name is, your first name, and also where you are joining us from. What city and country are you joining us from? Are you joining us from Nairobi, Kenya? Are you joining us from Tamale, Ghana, for instance? Tell us where you're joining us from, and also share the 3 figures that are your go-to figures when you're creating a figure, a data visualization. Is it a bar chart? Is it a line graph? Is it box plots? Is it area charts? What are your favorite figures to use? or when you are viewing other folks' visualization, your favorite types of figures for you to see in those data visualizations. So again, we're sharing our name, where we're joining us from, where you are joining us from, I should say, and also your 3 favorite figures. If you could only use 3 figures, what would those figure types be? So while you are doing that in the chat, it's only fair that I share a little bit about myself, as I did at the beginning, where I'm joining from, as well as my 3 favorite. So for me, I would say my name is Peter. I am joining you from the United States today, specifically the city of Chicago, which is in the middle part in the United States. It is morning time here. We're about 6 hours behind GMT in Chicago here in the United States. And my 3 favorite would be the bar chart. Love my handy bar chart. So useful in many different contexts. I would also say gotta have the line graph to show things, how they change over time. And then I would also say the area chart. And I can see Ezra. Good to see you, Ezra. I recognize your name there. And Emmanuel, I would agree with both of you that I also like that area chart. I think it's sort of an elegant way of showing space over a distance on our figure there. So that is absolutely wonderful as well. So what else? What else do we see? And I'm going to boost the audio as well. I heard that my audio is a little bit on the low end, so we'll hopefully correct that. Okay, Haruna, welcome back. I saw you the other day, so was saying that he likes a line chart, area chart, bar chart, and is joining us from Wa in Upper West region of Ghana. Wonderful. Excellent. Welcome to you. And Emmanuel is joining us from Ghana as well. Wisdom is joining from Accra. It says line chart, bar chart, and area chart. So again, my 3 favorite right here. Right, and we always have our favorite figures, but always keep in mind when we're doing data visualization that we want to ensure that we are ensuring that our data visualization that we're using for our project is going to match the type of data that we are using. So it's always important for us to match the data with the visualization we're doing. And I'm going to guide you along that. That's not going to be a hard sort of focus of what we're doing today, but we are going to be looking at some great features of Tableau here. So let's take a look at some Tableau figures. We've got scatter plots we can do in Tableau. This is an example of a bubble scatter plot. So we have not only an X and a Y axis, but we also have the size of the bubbles, hence the name bubble plot that we see here. It allows us to show actually 3 variables, one on the Y, one in the X, and one in the size. We also have maps. Nobody mentioned their go-to one was maps. I would say that's a close fourth. I love maps because they show that spatial geography and allow people to interact. And we're going to be creating some wonderful Africa maps in Tableau today. So maps is one. We also have our go-to bar chart. And a couple of you, Haruna and Wisdom, also mentioned that you love bar charts. We can create those in all different formats. In addition to all those formats, say we do not just want one visualization, a bar chart or a line chart or an area chart. We want to actually combine our favorite charts or the appropriate charts into one visualization. And guess what? In Tableau, we can do that. And what we call that is a data dashboard, which brings together a single or usually multiple data sets to visualize and offer an analysis on an overarching questions, in some cases a series of related questions, often with, and this is the key part, multiple figures. So many of you have seen those pages where there's a line graph and a bar chart and a map, and they're all on the same page, all in the same view. That is what we call a data dashboard, and that's what we're going to be creating here. Oftentimes, a data dashboard is going to have 3 to about 5 in number single data visualizations in the entire data dashboard. Right? Some of them have more, some of them have less. But the one thing to keep in mind as you have more and more figures in your data visualization is it becomes harder and harder for you to concentrate the audience on the message that you may be getting across. It may become too cluttered. So it's a balance between having too much information and having too little information. So we'll talk about that balances. So we'll see here. I'll give you some data dashboard examples here. Here's, for example, GDP growth rate across sub-Saharan African countries. So you can see a dotted line, a map, and a bar chart represented here. And the overarching question that this one's answering, because we're always thinking about what the overarching question you're getting at in a data visualization. The overall question here is, how fast or slowly are African countries in the sub-Saharan African region growing economically? So we can see there's a significant variation across these countries. So it allows us to look at that variation as well as to see the direction in which countries are going. So again, every dashboard is not just showing us data, but is telling us a story, helping us answer a series of questions that we want to learn from the data, right? That's the key part. Here's one, for example, looking at youth unemployment rate in the European Union and the United States, and looking at this over time and the variation across countries. So it allows us to answer the question, what are the differences in youth unemployment in Europe and the United States? Right? So that is the what question we're answering here. And if this was a live dashboard, we can play around with some of these figures. We're going to take a look at this. So here's another one, and it's going to be on the theme of the data that we're going to be using for today's session, which is COVID-19 data, because we're all familiar with the pandemic, now still in some senses in progress, but has certainly come under a lot of control since we were in those early parts of 2020, for instance. But this is an example of a COVID-19 cases database, which answers the question, which countries are getting hardest hit by COVID-19, and where is the pandemic spreading to and from, right? So this can help us answer those questions here. So we got some cool features in this data dashboard that I want to point out here. So let me add my annotation piece here. So for instance, what we can see here is we have total cases here, and we have total deaths here, and we have some drop downs here for country. We have a drop down slider right here where we can move, if this was live, to change the date to see whether there are different time periods that we see different results. These are all features that make this data dashboard interactive and not only allow your audience to answer the question that they'd see just by looking at this in a more two-dimensional way, but actually allows your audience to explore the data and ask additional questions for themselves, such as during this particular time period, what did it look like in this particular country, right? So it allows our viewer to drill down in the data for themselves and answer some questions, which is a lovely feature of this dashboard. But the key thing that we want to think about, and as I've been driving and looking at these data visualizations, is that we want to focus on a central question and a central message that is the story we're looking at, right? So we have to have an overarching theme there. We also want to maintain a lot of consistency in our visualization, and consistency we can see in terms of the colors, in terms of the spacings, in terms of the dimensions, and we need to kind of spread things out. We don't want to just cram a bunch of data visualizations that are packed on one another. You know, the blank space, or what designers may call the white space, so to speak, between the figures is really important to creating that elegant data visualization. I'm going to show you how Tableau thinks about positioning things as we get into it in just a moment. We could also think about communicating the message through non-text cues in terms of colors and our labeling there. And we want to, in the data visualization, remove all redundant labeling, right? Your teacher in school, primary and secondary school, oftentimes told you to label all axes. I'm sure many of you have heard that. You need to label everything on your figure. Well, when we're doing data visualization, we want to actually cut down on the amount of labeling such that it is still very clear for our viewer what we are displaying, but we're not being redundant. So for instance, if the number of COVID cases is in the title of the figure, we do not need to remind them that the y-axis is also COVID cases, because that's what the figure says in the title already. So we don't have to be redundant in what we're sharing in our data visualization. And the final thing we want to think about with our design fundamentals here as we get into it is what I was been encouraging you and reminding you of in looking at that previous data visualization is we want the viewer to be able to investigate for themselves that visualization. So let's take a look at a few these visualizations here. And I'm going to put some of them on your screen just to see what Tableau can do before we jump in. So this example here is called Searching for a Hospital, and it is located on the Tableau platform, which allows you to publish your data visualization so people can upvote them and discuss them and to use them. I'm going to be showing you how you get some inspiration from them, because it's really important when you're doing data visualization to look at what other people are doing and use that as inspirations for your own work. Right? So here's one searching for a hospital, focusing on Liberia. We got some maps here that's showing where Liberia is, and a lot of times we assume people know the places that we're talking about because we come from those places, but not everyone does. So they got some geographical references here. They got some infographic elements talking about the number of hospitals, clinics, and health centers in the country. Then we come drive down here, we even have a place where you can actually click on different sections that talk about the different hospitals here. So we've got here, for instance, so we got some other informations. We got a tooltip here that shows us the facilities per capita in different areas of the country. And this pop-up right here is what we call the tooltip. And then we have some interesting aspect that relates to how many people are in these different regions of the country, and then how many health facilities are they there in terms of the number of the facilities. So the big question is, given the population across Liberia in different areas, are we able to service people's healthcare needs in terms of the size and the scope of the healthcare infrastructure? And that's what this data visualization is getting at, and that's what we can see on this map as well as this figure here. We also see some text figures that we can have to help us tell the story in addition to that. Let's look at another one. And I love this one. This is one of my favorites. This is not in the African context, but this is in the context of London. And many of you know or like cycling or biking. In a lot of countries, biking is a common thing that people do to get to work. Here in Chicago, people even bike a few miles or kilometers to get to work. And that could be a nice way to start your day and avoid that terrible traffic that oftentimes we experience. And so what you can see here on the map is in a sense, the bike routes of London, right? And there are many. And what you could see along these bike routes are a few things: where there have been fatal bike crashes or collisions, where there have been serious ones, and where there have been sort of, brushes with cars, right? And you can see there are many of that. And you can see that we could see how things change over time in terms of the number of bike collisions over a large period of time. And it's really elegantly designed, right? So notice the color scheme here. The elegance of it, the simplicity of it, right? There's a lot of design work that went into this data visualization. It's not just about sharing the data per se. All right, I'm going to focus on maybe one more data visualization for us to take a look at. And these are all coming from Tableau. So as you improve in your skills, these are all potential data visualizations that you can do in Tableau. So let's look at this one entitled Urban Africa. As many of you know, the African continent is undergoing urbanization as well as a baby boom as well, that youth bulge that folks talk about. In fact, in my own research, and my background is in social science and political science, I've been studying the effects of urbanization and changes in urban environments on political elements such as support for ruling parties and opposition parties. So that's where my background is, in the social sciences and applying data and visualizing data in that space as well. And so I'm really interested in this issue of changes in urban environment. And this data visualization gives us a little bit of a view about what that looks like, right? So you can see changes over time since 1950 of the number of folks living in an urban area. You can see here, and you can see some figures that are showing sort of the urban size or the distance. And I'll tell you this, it's really hard to define what is urban. That's a big question in the literature on urbanization, is what is the city? So if we think about Accra or Nairobi, you'll know that everyone's building out in different areas. I know in Ghana, there's a big development going on in Pokwasi, for instance. And you'll notice the city is going further and further out, which is probably going to lengthen commutes and make traffic worse and worse. But again, where does the boundaries of Accra or Nairobi start and stop? That would be a question that we have. And this visualization doesn't really discuss that here, but at least tells us about the size and the change over time. And it's really cool, right? One of the key features of this is the design elements that the designer has brought into this data visualization. So there's a lot you can do with these platforms, as I've shown you. And I really like taking a look at what other folks have done, because it allows us to be inspired, and such that we're not starting from scratch, right? We can see a lot of things, color palettes, graphics, other things that we can use for our data visualization. So last part I want to say before we get into the section that we're going to look at in terms of the workshop and the tutorial in Tableau, which we're going to work together, is why we're doing this at all, right? And what are some of the assumptions that we have in our data visualization. And one of the reasons why we're doing this, in addition to those that I mentioned at the outset, is to educate people, right? Educate people within our own organizations and in the larger public. But in doing so, we need to realize a few things when we're creating our data visualization in addition to those design elements before. We need to assume that people looking at our data visualization do not have a statistical literacy element. Many of you are, in fact, learning statistics and are gaining statistical literacy. But if you think about your parents, for instance, who may have went to school many years ago, if they even did go to school fully, right, years ago, how much do they know about regression models and other sort of models, data shaping, and all of these things? I would argue most likely maybe a little bit, maybe a lot, but most of them will say not so much, right? And that's indicative of the mass public. In addition to that, us, so now we're not just including those who may have some statistical literacy, but us more broadly, also need to realize that people don't always relate well to statistics and abstract numbers. If you recall that example I showed about Liberian hospitals, there was a lot of text that was explaining the impacts of having not enough hospitals in neighborhoods, right? So it's helping us take the numbers that we see, i.e. the number of health facilities per capita in a different area of the country, and then talking about how that matters for people. So we have to communicate that story of how it matters to us humans, make those numbers come alive. And that's also because oftentimes we hear numbers, we begin to disengage. Think back to issues of conflict, right? There are many different conflicts that are ongoing in our world, sadly, today. And every time you open up the news, you'll see numbers about those conflicts. How many people were wounded? Sadly, how many people have lost their lives? How many people have been displaced, right? We know that there are a lot of numbers these days when it comes to conflict, right? But how many of us, when we hear those numbers, become sort of numb to those numbers, right? Not only what is going on, but, we just say, oh, another death or another case or another whatever it may be, right? Particularly when it's something quite sad and depressing in many respects. And that's because we disengage with those numbers. We also need to have a story behind those numbers, because each one of those people displaced, killed, injured, has a family, is a person, right? They're real people oftentimes that we're describing with our data visualization. If you're in a business, those are real customers who are trying to solve problems. And so as much as we care about visualizing the data, we need to make sure that we're doing something that is human-centered in terms of both our design of our visualization, but also in terms of the center of it and relating to us as people as well. which leads us to the fourth point, which I've been alluding to, is that sometimes our statistics can oftentimes dehumanize and depersonalize us. Sometimes we do that purposely, right? And the reason why we use statistics is to do that. But our job as somebody who cares about humanity alongside the use of data and what we're doing to help us, humanize what we're doing and personalize our data as much as we can, right? And that's always a struggle when it comes to the use of data as well. But I think it's an important thing for most of you who are data visualization or data science to always think about. So let's get into our tutorial today. And I will put in the chat, I want to put that opportunity at the Institute for the applications to enroll in the programs here at the Leaders of Africa Institute. I'm going to put that in the chat again because maybe not everyone had seen that because many of you had joined. But I'm also going to share in the chat. Let me do that here. And unfortunately, I have no access to share in the chat, so I'd ask the host to please allow me to share with everyone as we get going, because it's a very important thing for me to share the data with you. So while they're giving me that permission to share with everyone here, let's see if we can refresh this. I am only able to share with tech support, so if you don't mind giving me that additional ability, that would be good. Regardless, I've shared those links there in tech support, and hopefully they'll also be able to put them in the chat. But I also want you to download the workshop data for today. And so let's open up that data. And here we go. I've got that permission. Thank you very much. So hopefully everyone's got that ability here. So let me put back that fellowship opportunity here for those of you who just joined. So this allows you to find that application to that program, because I know I'll be addressing that at the end again. And here I'm also going to put a link to the workshop data here, as well as Tableau download. So you can see in your chat, I've included a link, and this link will take you to the page to download Tableau. So if you want to follow along, you can download Tableau. Now, Tableau takes a while to download, so if you do not have a very strong wireless network, I do not suggest that you do that here. However, I do suggest that you download for today's workshop so you can at least look at the raw data, the data set that has been linked on Zoom. So if you click there, it's going to download an Excel spreadsheet onto your computer, and then we're going to be using this data today to do the tutorial. So if you're able to follow along, that's wonderful. If not, then you're going to be able to replicate what we are doing here with the recording on your own time. And sometimes that's a little bit better because sometimes these programs weigh on our computer. So let us get into Tableau here. So the first thing that we're going to do, I'm just going to clear off a few of the websites here. First thing we're going to see when we go to Tableau's website is this. We see all of these different sites and different solutions. You can see the products and solutions. Remember all those ones that I mentioned here. We're going to be using Tableau Public, and I've actually sent you right to the download link. So let's look at Tableau Public. And it says, go to public. It says fully hosted, free with a few limits. You can share things publicly, so on and so forth, right? And all the great things that you can do with Tableau Public. And here you go. You can go to Tableau Public Home. So we're going to do that. And you're going to see in Tableau Public Home, you're going to see that place to get some inspiration for your data visualization, including the viz of the day or visualization of the day, as well as trending visualizations. So take a look at all these trending visualizations. You can see thousands of people have been viewing these data visualizations. So you could actually create your own professional profile, as you're going to see here on Tableau, and share your data visualization. For those of you looking for employment, grant opportunities, things of this nature, this building of your portfolio is a really important way for you to be able to grasp those opportunities. So I encourage you to do that. And you can see how people are sharing here as well from around the world. So if you look at folks' name here, you can see people from the African continent, from the South Asian subcontinent, from North America, everyone sharing their data visualization in one data visualization happy family. So get inspired here by these. In addition to this, you'll see that you can download you can download it by going to Tableau Public, and then it says sign up, and after you signed up, you can download Tableau. And I've given you the download link that is shared in your chat. So he says download public, it's free, but it is a sizable file, so you need to have bandwidth to do that. So let's assume that you've signed up for an account and you've downloaded it, because as you can imagine, I'm all set to go here, and the most recent version is the 2023 version. So this is what Tableau looks like when you open it. And you can see my example project is queued up here. This is what we're going to be working through today. And I've also have it queued up in case we face any issues. We can at least look at it. But you can see here you can connect. And the first thing you want to do is connect to a data file. And there are so many different data files that you can do. You can do Excel, which we're going to use today for the sake of simplicity. Text file, JSON, GeoJSON, spatial files, other databases or servers. And Tableau Desktop even has more additional options that you can connect to. But we're going to use Microsoft Excel here. I'm going to be using that COVID data that I shared in your chat. So let us open up that data here and take a look at it. So if you've downloaded the data, you have a spreadsheet that looks like this. And it has a data set. This is coming from Our World in Data, and it's coming from data from that goes all the way up to February of last year, February 18, 2022. So this is real and pretty recent data, right? So this is real. Whatever we're seeing today is not data that we just made up here, but it's actual data that we see. And the data is on the level of the country, day level, right? We always want to think about our data in terms of what we call our unit of observation. The unit of observation is usually found on the rows of the data, right? So we have the columns. Those are sort of our what we call our variables. And then the units of observation are here. And we can see is every country, like Algeria, has an observation on every day, right? That's why I said it's a daily country unit of observation. We have for every day, we have the number of total cases, new cases, new deaths, total deaths, new deaths. That's what we're going to be focusing on, the deaths and the cases in COVID-19, right? So on and so forth. There are other things about hospital clinics and testing. You can see in the early period of the pandemic, there are a lot of blank cells because people were not doing testing or they didn't have the vaccines at that period of time, right? That was right at the beginning, around February of 2020. Where the data begins, right? So every country, if we could scroll down here, has this amount of data. Scroll down just so that everyone can see this. Burundi, Central African Republic, Chad, Comoros. So you can see that this data set is really big. In fact, you can see that there are 38,000 different observations in this data set. Right? So it's not a massive data set with over 1 million observation or 100,000, but it's a big data set because we have every day for every country during this period of the pandemic, right? All the way down to Zimbabwe here. And you can see where it ends is February 18, 2022. So the reason why I'm taking you through this data so you can see our example data we're using is that this is a good practice for all of you that are doing data and design, which is get familiar with your data. Don't just tap into a database and start visualizing it, but look at it. Because the other thing you do when you look at your data is you see some problems that may emerge, missing data or things that are coded wrong, and you're going to have to know to correct those, or what we call clean the data. Fortunately for us today, I have, and the Leaders of Africa Institute have cleaned this data for you. So there are not going to be a lot of data wrangling issues, because the purpose is learning how to use Tableau to visualize and not correcting data cleaning errors. Again, that's something we talk about more in the full data and design program I've encouraged you to apply to. But for today, we're just going to look at that data visualization component. But always look at your data. Try and open your data. Just spot check it. Look at it. That is a really good first step as we're getting into that. So this is the data we're going to be using. So I'm going to flip back into Tableau here, and that's what we've got. Is we've got Tableau, and I'm going to say connect to a file, and I'm going to click Excel file. And basically what it's going to do, it's going to pop up a dialog box, and I'm going to find my file, and it's right here. I'm going to open it. And things are going to be a little bit delayed due to the fact that that using Tableau and Zoom sometimes interacts. So if you're seeing a lag between things, sometimes that is the reason, or the computer's seeming to go a little slow. That's because Tableau is a pretty light software actually, so it works fairly well, but it is heavy on in some cases when you're doing a lot of things. So I'm going to drag over the data set into this area. And this is sort of like our working area. This is the place that we have where all the data we are populating, we can connect it to one another. So if you have multiple data sets that have a similar variable, say I have a data set on COVID cases, which I do here, and I have a country COVID cases, but I have another data set that has population for those same countries, I can actually connect those two countries using the common variable. In this case, country. So that's an example right there. All right. So I've dragged it over. Now it's going to show me what's in my data. And I'm going to see that down here. And the thing that I want to make sure at this phase is that every variable that I have, Tableau's machine learning approach to determining what those variables is, did a good job actually sorting the type. So the type, there are a few types. So we click on this. We have numbers, we have dates and times, we have dates, we have string variables, which are like text, a fancy word for text. We also have geographical sort of variables at different levels. And the reason why it's important to tag each of our variables and get the correct type is because Tableau is going to be using certain things to make assumptions in our figures about the type of data that we have. So for instance, if we do not tell Tableau that this country is a geographical string that is a country, then it's not going to know to match it up to the country names on our map. It will just say, like, where is Zimbabwe? What is a Zimbabwe? Right? Whereas if we tell it it is a country that's in this variable, then it knows, oh, whenever I create a map, if there is a Zimbabwe in my data set, pair that and populate that data to the Zimbabwe that we have already in Tableau on the map. Right? So it allows them to connect to one another. So take the time to go through your variables. This is really good. It's gotten the date here. Remember, it's at the date and the country. So we have date and country. So total cases here, it's a number and it's a whole number. So you can't have a half a person, right? So we're dealing with whole numbers here, and it's done a really good job of deciding that for us. But again, your data set, it may not. So make sure you scroll across. Here's our raw data, and we can see on the top here the type, right? So you can see, okay, this is a country, this is a date, this is a whole number, and we want to make sure everything looks good. And it does, because I've cleaned it, made sure everything works, and Tableau is pretty good, but sometimes you got to manually do that. Now, a lot of folks are saying, why isn't my map working? Well, one of the reasons your map may be not working is you didn't tell the computer that you actually have countries or a geographical level. And you'll notice there are different types of geographical levels here as well. It talks about the properties of the data here. But the geographical level, there are several. Cities, airports, area codes if you're U.S. These are census areas in the U.S., right? Congressional districts. So, you can load other shape files too. We're not going to do that here for other countries, other cities that can be used for matching. right? So that's another thing. So just because there's a lot of US stuff doesn't mean you can do other countries as well. So we're good. We're loading it in here. We're going to keep it simple, and we're going to create our first what we call sheet. And so if we go down here, there's a few buttons. There's one button to create a new worksheet. Think of worksheets like a single figure, right? And so we're going to create several figures. And then we have another tab here, which says new dashboard. That's when we create our dashboard. And then we have here a new story, which is another format that Tableau uses to bring our figures together in what we call a story format. So I'll show you what that looks like as well. But it all begins with this first one, a sheet down here. And it looks like this. I'm going to do this, like this. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a map, right? So one of the things you want to do is you want to label your workbook in Tableau very, very well, right? Documentation's key. So I'm going to label it down here by double clicking just like you would in Excel. And I'll say Africa, COVID-19, and then I'm going to say cases, map, right? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to label it down here, and it adds it as the title up here, the sheet name. So we can adjust that later when we get to our visualization, right? So I'm going to do that. I want to label that because this is the map of new cases. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the country, and I can do it in a lot of places. I can just kind of like throw it here, or I can throw it up here. So I can throw it up here as like the columns here, and then the rows, sorry. And then I'm going to find the new cases, right? So you can find this variable by searching down here. So you can find new cases, or you can, if you have a lot of data, you can do this. You can just simply search. And this is if you have a lot of variables that you're looking at. So there's both ways. So I'm going to look at columns, new cases, and then there we go. It's going to default to a bar chart. Here we go. This is real data of the new cases. Now, a couple things I want to show you here. The first thing is what it's done. It's made another assumption. It is sum of the new cases. So if you click right here and you see this, you can see that it's going to make a decision here, and we're going to go down to measure, and you have all different ones. You can do a count, which is sort of, is for some data. You can do a min, maximum, variance. In this case, we're going to choose to use a sum. We want the total number of new cases over the entire period, and that's a sum. But you can do some basic calculations in other ways here. So I wanted to note that. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this Show Me button here, and I'm going to create the map. By doing this, I'm going to click on the map, and then there we go. The map is loaded, and it does a fairly good job already populating things very nicely, right? We're gonna see this quite nicely. Now, this map is great, and you can see all the countries are populating here. And there's a cool thing that you notice right here is that we see a tooltip here. Now, if you want to adjust the tooltip, so what you see here, you simply go to tooltip here, and then you're able to adjust the text, what things look like, and then the variables here as well by inserting, for instance, a variable name. So everything looks good. We'll do some adjustment of tooltips a little bit later. But we have this nice map here. I want to do a few things with this map here. We can change the color, although we're not going to change it, but you simply click color here, and then it allows us to do other different versions. So let's apply this. There's a red one. Right? I'm going to be using the blue here, but you can change the color, and it's making all those decisions for us, right, that are there. So you can change the tooltip. You can change the color here as well. And we can get a little bit more fancy if we use the map menu here, and we edit, for instance, the background layers. So say we don't want all these other countries here. We just want the map of Africa here. We can take off some of the information. So we can go to map, that's where I went, and then background layers. I'm going to remove base, remove the land cover, the country borders, the names. This is the background area. States and provinces. There we go. Wow. I unhighlighted all of this, and then I'd be able to get this map of where we have the data. And we could also do dark mode. We could do outdoors map. So this brings in other ones. I'm going to do the light map where we don't have anything here because we just want the Africa. And then we can do that for the other layers as well. Great. Look at this. It's a beautiful map here. And it shows the sum of new cases, right? So you can see that here. Now this is my legend here. I'm going to format my legend here. And I can do that in different ways. I can change the fonts here. And I can also change the text here as well. So I can edit the title here. And I can say sum of new cases. And I'll just say new cases. Right? And I'm going to be doing everything in a font called Open Sans. This is one of our favorite fonts at the Leaders of Africa Institute. Open Sans, semi-bold. There we go. And there we go, new cases. So there we go. We have this beautiful figure right here, and we got this. Yeah, it is really nice, in fact, Ezra, and how sort of it slims things down here. And you can see South Africa's highest number of cases here, 3.6 million during this period. Great, and you can find your own country with Kenya here, 322,000. Ghana, I'm just picking these countries because the majority of it's come, 158,000 during this period. Nigeria, 254. Again, obviously populations are very different. So great, we have another map here. I'm going to also do another map here. I'm going to create a new sheet here. I'm going to say this is going to be our deaths map. So say Africa, COVID-19, deaths map. We're going to do the same thing we did before in terms of how we're going to bring in the data. So I'm going to take the country, I'm going to drag the rows, and I'm going to do, this case, the new deaths. New deaths, drag it here. It's going to give me that bar chart. I can do a lot of different things with this. We're going to do some other types of charts, so don't worry as we get going. But I'm going to go to this heat map, this chloropleth or heat map version here. And I'm going to do the same thing I did. I'm going to go up to map. I'm going to do the background layers. I'm going to do light. That's good. I'm going to take off all these other ones. Again, you can play around with the different filtering, but this is really going to clean up. Because on our data visualization, if we're just talking about African countries, we don't need to show a map of Asia, right? We want to slim down that information we're doing. And we can see here the number of deaths in that period was 1,400 in Ghana. In Kenya, it was 5,600. In Nigeria, 3,100. South Africa was the most, had close to 100,000 deaths, sadly. Right? Sad period of time. But it was one thing that we can truly say that us as the world experienced together as a common lived experience, no matter where you're from. So great, we got two beautiful maps here, right? Although I'm going to change the color here. I'm going to edit the color because I want to use a little bit of red because I want to indicate like trouble or death or danger. So I'm going to use red color to help me communicate that concern. So I'm going to call green, so we got blue here, we got red here. The colors look really good side by side. All right, let's create a table. Say we wanted to be able to do it without the tooltip for sorting and other purposes. Let's create a new one, and I'm going to do Africa COVID-19 table. So I'm creating all these figures. I'm going to bring them together in a moment, but I'm creating all the pieces of my my data dashboard one by one, right? All right, let's do this. So let's get the countries here because we want countries, and we want the countries to be the rows. So there we go. We've got those countries. And then I want new cases. So we've got new cases. I'm just going to drag this. You can drag this over even on top, or you can drag this, in the columns here. That's fine. Either way is fine. Again, this is what makes Tableau easy to do. Gotta love this when it does this. All right, there we go. It's going to like side-by-side stuff. And we could do other factors here, but then if we flip it to table, you're going to have other forms, other ones that you can do here. Then we have like this. So we have new deaths, new cases, and we have and new deaths. Make sure though that when we come down here, when we click on this little tab here, and you can see the formula here, if I double click here, you can see that we're doing the sum, because I don't want, I want the sum of them, not just, by day, because we can't really share that on a figure. And we could do some things to size these things up, moving things around, sizing things up on the figure here by dragging things across, but everything looks pretty good on this table here. And the nice thing is we're going to be able to format some other elements of this as well. Okay, we've got a table. Let's now do our dashboard. Let's start to put together a dashboard. There are a few more other things that I want to do, like a line chart over time, but I'll do that once I get my dashboard started. So I'm going to go down here and I click New Dashboard. It's going to look like this. Now, one of the biggest challenges new learners of Tableau have is the size of the dashboard. You always have to make sure to adjust your size of your dashboard such that it's going to fit all your figures, and it also fits on one screen. It's always good to have a dashboard where you don't have to scroll down a page usually on many dashboards, although for some of the examples that I showed earlier, you did have to scroll, like the bike example, the urbanization example, the hospital example. You did have to scroll. But in an ideal sense, you can actually just kind of do it in one panel so that everyone can see sort of that view of the data in one view. That's always really nice to do. You're going to see why in just a moment. So I'm going to come down here to size, and I'm going to change the height and the width for the minimum size here. You can see it jump across. This px is a measurement that we use in graphic design called a pixel. So that's what a px is, if you've had any questions about that. And we're going to do it the whole size here so that I can see it, and the height's okay. So we're going to start there. Now I'm going to go to layout here, and I can do a few things when I get started, which is, creating a background and doing all those pieces, which I'm going to do in just a moment. So I'm going to create this dashboard. I'm going to name it Africa COVID-19 Dashboard. Notice how I'm labeling everything. Get in the practice of documenting things. As a data scientist and a designer, you need to make sure you're keeping your workbooks very neat. Again, you'll save time in the long run. So let's bring this in. And I want to add into the dashboard different things. So let me go to dashboard here, and you'll see right here, there are many different things I can add. I can add floating, which means that you can move it anywhere here. But I really suggest starting off tiled, which means that everything you can move in this area, but it's going to kind of snap it to grid lines in a sense to keep things a little bit organized. So some things are going to float, some things are not. So the first thing you'll see is there's a lot of things here. We can bring in, for instance, a data visualization, right? A container, right? For instance, right? And you can also see that the sheets right here are all the sheets we have. We can drag them over. But I'm going to start off with the first thing. I'm going to drag some text. Every data visualization needs a title. So let's add a title. So I'm going to drag over text. And I'm going to do, I'm going to get a pretty big font here. And I'm going to say COVID-19 cases in Africa. February, let's say until February 2022, right? That's what I wanted to do. So I'll do that, and it's going to do this, and it's a little bit of a gray color. I'm going to change that to dark. I got to highlight over it and do that, and there we go. And then I'm going to be able to sort of scroll this thing around in a moment so that it shrinks. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to center this like that. Okay, I've got a title here, right? I'm going to add some other text here underneath. And I'm going to also do this in Open Sans regular here. I'm going to up the font. You want to make sure your fonts are big enough that people can read on their screen and their medium. I'll say COVID-19 has had profound effects on many African countries. Although there is significant country variation in terms of those effects, all have been touched by the pandemic, right? Something like that, right? I'm emphasizing the fact that you can explore the country differences here. So there we go. We've got that. I'm going to center this. I'm going to shrink the font just a little bit here. So there we go. Right? So we got these things here. So now let's start adding some data visualizations. So I'm going to add the cases map. I'm going to add it here. If I drag it here, it's going to allow me to kind of move. That's because it's tiled. I'm going to move it here. And we're going to see that things move. I'm going to now move this by gripping this up here. So we're starting to see this visualization come. I'm going to click on this title here. I'm going to double click on the title. And I'm going to change this to Open Sans bold. Semi-bold. I'm going to change the sheet name here. Actually, the sheet name's pretty good, but you can actually change the actual name here. So that's a key thing. And there we go. So we got my nice map here. Everything is populating here. I can create a background for this as well. So I'm going to show you how to do that in a moment. And I'm going to also drag my deaths, and I'm going to put my deaths side by side. And I'm also going to do this. You can see how easy it is if I've kept everything nice and organized, right? And I'm going to do that. Everything looks good. Great. I'm starting to create this beautiful data dashboard here. And then finally, I'm going to put my table down here. So I'm going to leave some space. Now I want to shrink some of these areas here. So I'm going to begin to shrink. I'm going to begin to sort of reposition my quadrants here now that I've got things in. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Now it's moving. Look at that. So we begin to have a nice dashboard that is there. It's got a big map here and there. You can see these legends are on the side. So I want to bring the legends closer to the map so they're not over to the side. And what we can do is we can float them. In other words, make them movable. So we can do this here. We can actually add them to a container, but I'm going to float them so you can see how we float. So I'm going to float this, and this allows us individually, I'm going to float this, to move them closer to our data visualization. Let's kind of move them in there by clicking on this little tab and float, right? Some of these are tiled, right? So they're stuck, as you can see, and some of them are floating. I'm going to float them. I'm going to get those sort of right here. Okay, great. So we've got a great visualization here. This table, however, is a little bit small. So if we have some time, we'll be able to, well, we might as well do it now. Expand them out. Yeah, so there we go. We can now see that. I'm going to change my fonts here. Again, I'm showing you the design components of this as well, because you see how important design is in this whole thing. Because we want to have that consistency of font and representation here. All right, great. It's looking really good, and we've only spent about 20 minutes doing this, right? So it's amazing what you can do in just a few minutes. Tooltips look great. Let's remove this box here. So there we go. All right. So we've done a really good job of doing this, but I want to add a few other formatting background elements of this. I want to highlight here, and I want to do the background. So I'm going to highlight the whole visualization here. I'm going to change the background. I'm going to use a sort of an off green. It's really important to use some faded colors, these sort of pastel colors, what they call, which are here. Because they allow us to see the data visualization. Sort of primary colors or hard colors are going to be really in your face and going to be hard to read. So this is a nice pastel color here. And you'll notice that the data visualization here has a doesn't have that color here. So it's white, but I'm going to change that in a moment. But what I can do is I can change, maybe I want the title colors to be a little bit different. I want a blue to highlight sort of each of the data visualizations, or a red. Look at this, red here. There we go. So you look at how I'm creating a little bit of a color code here. Looks a little bit silly, so I'm going to actually just do blue for everyone. So this blue and pastel, and the background's just going to highlight, around the area here. We're going to fill in some of those gaps here. The other thing I'm going to do with these figures is they're really close together. Remember how I said you need a lot of white space here? I'm going to click on these figures. I'm going to add what we call padding. I'm going to add a left padding. I'm going to take off this thing here, which is a lock, which keeps everything there. I'm going to add 20 onto the side, 20 pixels. I'm going to add 10 in the middle. So this is going to space things out a little bit. I'm going to add some, maybe 10 on the top and 10 on the bottom, so that we're not, encroaching under the table. You see how it gives it a little bit of space and definition here? So I'm going to do the same thing I did there, except I'm going to do 10 on the left, and I'm going to do 20 on the right, and I'm going to do 10 and 10. Let's keep things consistent. And the same thing I'm going to do with my table here. Again, I'm adding padding here, and padding is going to allow me to be able to sort of give that space that we need. And it's really hard on our eyes when our visualizations are all clustered. You can tell somebody who's been new to data visualization, all their figures are all clustered one another on top of one another. Okay, cool. Look at this. Look what we've got here. We've got a really cool data visualization that's burgeoning here. It's not perfect, but it's really good. And we don't have all that time to do everything here that we could. But we are bringing this together really nicely. I'm going to have to respace those in a moment anyway. Now, I want to add some cool features here. I want to allow my viewer now to explore the data, to find their country really quickly, and to do some cool things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this figure, and I'm going to click on this little symbol here. This is the universal filter symbol. It's going to be able to use this as a filter. And I'm also going to do it here. And I'm also going to do it here. And what that does is that it connects each of these figures. So notice how when I click on one, it zooms into the other, because all of them are now being used as a filter. The country is being used as a filter here, right? That is a really cool thing, because if we want to see Niger, we can see, how many cases and deaths all in one. You can see that going in, and it's animating here. Now, I want to take this a step further, is that I want to add a filter for the entire data visualization. So I'm going to click on this little tab here. I'm going to go down to filters, and I'm going to say filter by country, and it's going to come up with this filter on the side. It always goes to the side on your dashboard, but I want to float it in a moment. So I want to click here, and I'm going to do two things. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into a drop down. So I don't want just a list of all the countries. I want that really nice, cute drop down here. So I'm going to go to drop down. So look at that. Now it's a drop down of it. Then I'm going to go here and do the same thing I did with the legends. I'm going to float it. It's going to be floated. Look at that. So now I've got this nice little menu here. I'm going to expand this out, and I'm going to change the title here, because cases is countries is really small. I'm going to do my font here. I'm going to say select a country to explore. It's kind of fun and inviting. Let's enlarge that a little bit. There we go. Right, so the last thing that we may need to do here is we may need to apply this, because I want this, because if you do this right now, take off all, it only works with one figure, right? Only works with that one figure I popped out. So what I want to do here is I want to go here and apply and say all data using this. And then now I can click, I can add, I can play around with it. time works similarly too. But look at that. Isn't this really cool how I'm able to do that? Now people can interact. Say if you want the East African region, you're able to get the East African region countries selected here in the drop down and then be able to visualize just those countries. Let's click all here for now. I've created a nice interactive feature in my data visualization. Let's give myself a little bit of space here. I see there is a question about my social media. I will share my LinkedIn address at the very end for folks to connect with me, as well as the Institute as well. So Manuel, I see your comment there. I will share that. So this is really cool. But wait, there's a little bit more. And I want to do a little bit more when it comes to the overtime piece. So let's create another sheet here. I'm going to say COVID-19 over time. Now this is going to be our line graph because we want to see how things change over time, not just what is the sum for each country, but we want to see how things change perhaps. So let's do that here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick date now. I'm going to have date be my rows, and I'm going to have the number. I'm going to do cases. And I'm going to do new cases, and I'm going to do deaths, new deaths. And now it's going to create two little very scrunched line charts here. I'm going to click on line charts. So there it is, line charts. Looks terrible. So a couple things why it looks terrible is that number one, we have two figures here, and we're going to try and bring them in together. And number two, it just looks like a pyramid up and down. But we have daily data, so we can get more fine-grained data. So I want to click on this axis here, right? Sorry. I want to click on the new cases here. And I want to, and the year. Here, sorry, there we go. I want to click on the year here in this little tab, and it's going to allow us to select, different time periods. So we have year selected, but what happens if we have day? Or what happens if we have month? That looks a lot better, right? That looks a lot like smoother, right? Showing the different facts that the pandemic wasn't just up in one year and down another. It was actually periods of waves, right? Remember how it was the waves of the pandemic, the new variants coming, right? So we want to be able to show that. And that yearly one doesn't show that. But we want to show, I'm going to do the day because we have day. So why don't we focus on day here? So that's what we're going to do here. Sorry, here. Actually, let's do month. There we go. That's what I wanted to do. So is the day down here. So I'm going to click day here, and we can see that this is the format here for the day. The nice thing about the date is that you can also format this in different ways. That allows you to sort of truncate things. So let me see if we can do that. So if I click on this, we can go to the custom, the day of the date. We can make sure all of that is there. This is how we sort of bring things together. We can have custom ranges in our dates. So if we don't want to do the whole period of time, we can also scrunch things down right there. So it's another place that we can make an adjustment. Okay, let me try and get this zoom piece out of the way. Yeah, so you do that by double clicking right there. And you can also change, there are different places here to, oh, Let me get out. Sorry, the Zoom bar for screen share is oftentimes chasing me around. So Emmanuel said the data set that I'm using that we've created for today's session, I've shared that again in the chat. So other pieces, you can play around with this as well, with the date and so on and so forth, which is great. So the next thing I want to do is I want to bring these two figures together. So I'm going to highlight both of these. One second. Well, I might as well show you this. We can actually show major tick marks, fixed and automatic. We can do all of that. I'll do automatic here. And let's see if we can. Hold on one moment. Okay. Okay, so we've got these figures right here that we can see over time. We'll just leave it at that for the sake of time because I want to, and we can hide the card there so that way it goes away. And so this is the way in which we kind of, we get this over time. So let's post this one in here into our data dashboard. And I'm going to put this one down here underneath here. I'm going to move this up like this. So there we go. And let me change the background colors right here, just so that we have them of the individual figures. Let me change the background of this. Got that nice blue top here. Okay. There we go. And then let's get the title changed around here. Okay. And then the last thing I got to do is I've got to add my padding. Hopefully this is going to be a lot of review, that I'm doing things multiple times, and that's the purpose of me being able to do this. There we go. And let's get this back to home. There we go. So now we've got this whole piece, and the nice thing about it is that this allows us to look at this. Watch this. I'm going to select now a country like Ghana. I can search it. And there we go. The number of deaths and cases are now shown over time in this figure, right? So now I've done that. Okay, let's see here. Okay, let's go back to all. All right, so how did we do over time? So let me just review that. I'm seeing the question and answer. Feel free to put in the chat or the question and answer. Over time. So what I did was I simply took the columns and I moved the day here, the date into the columns and the rows, and then I told it, please give me, a line chart like this. Right, like that. So you have other ones like bar chart, but this is the line chart. So let's do that. Okay. Any other questions at this time before I move on to sort of the next set of things? We have a folks that are talking about doing, that wanted to share. Also, can you review a dashboard and tell me what I've done wrong? I'll take a look at that at the very end of today's session. I've shared the data with you, so we have that. So let's try and do something with this data here. Hold on one moment. Okay. Just trying to see if there's anything else that I want to bring in to this. Okay. So let me do one thing here. Let me drag on pause here. I'm going to show that line. I'm going to show, since there are a lot of questions, I'm going to show this one again, the overtime thing. So I'm going to remove all of these. So let me show you how to do this one again, the overtime one, because there were a lot of questions in the chat on that. So let's do that. You can do it like this. So oftentimes we want to drag them up here, so the rows can be the date, like this, and then there we go. Let's do undo. So this is going to look like this, but we want them shifted like that. So there we go. So there we go. There are our examples, and we can slip things around here as well. So for the sake of time, I'm going to go back, and I'm going to finalize our visualization. We'll publish it. Just going back. Okay. So we're back here. We've got our visualization here. So I'm going to do one other last thing is I'm going to do a bar chart. So let me do a bar chart, and we're going to add that in, and that will be the last thing that we do before we publish. So I'm going to do a bar chart, and this is going to be countries on the rows, and I'm going to have actually I'm going to take regions. Sorry, let's do regions. Go regions. So we go regions, and then we're going to do new cases. So this is going to do new cases per region. So we also have regions. Now the nice thing about this is that I can transpose this, so I can go like this by toggling it like this, and also use these buttons to order it, and then I can drag it out a little bit here. So there we go. This is the different regions, and then now, and we'll call this new cases by region. And we're going to go back to our data dashboard, and we're going to put that one kind of off to the side here. Like that. Doesn't look the best, but I'm going to show you one that does. Okay. We get this formatted. Open sans semi-bold. Okay, there we go. And then let's drag. Fighting the zoom. Okay, there we go. Let's drag this up. There we go. Now that one's going to put this one on the side. We got to do the background piece. So let's do the layout. And let's give this that nice blue sort of background here. And then I've got to add the padding. I got to make sure everything is consistent here. I'm almost done my visualization here. And then there we go. Very good. Now this one is a little bit crunched, I will say, so I'll probably want to enlarge it like that. But there we go. I will put the filter on this and the filter on that. So there we go. So if we do Algeria, it's going to pull up North Africa because it's in the region. It's going to show us the date and time, so on and so forth. All right. So these are some of the key things that we can do here. I think the only other thing, I'm going to try and see if we can do one last thing here. But if we can't do it now, then we will share that later. So one of the other things you can do here, I'm not going to show it here today, but in this figure right here, we can do a dual axis. A dual axis allows us to combine these two figures, so such that you have new deaths and new cases on the same figure. And I'm going to show you what that looks like in just a moment when I pull up the final example for today. So let us now, since we're up against time, let's take our dashboard here. And the last thing we need to do is we need to save it and to publish it. And the way you do is you save it in Tableau Public. So you're going to use File, and you're going to use Tableau Public, Save As, and you're going to save it as in Tableau Public. Now, it's going to require that you sign in. I have already signed into my account, but you're going to need to sign in. This is the only way you can save the Tableau visualizations, is saving it here. So I'm going to save this workbook, and I'm going to say COVID-19 cases in Africa dashboard. So this is what my title is going to be when I see it online. So I'm going to save it. It's going to take a moment. This is the way you save it in Tableau Public, right? We're assuming we're using the free version. Okay, now it's going to come, and guess what? By Leaders of Africa or the Institute, you're going to see this beautiful dashboard here, right? There's some problems with it. This table's scrunched. This needs to be moved, but for the sake of time, because we only have 90 minutes for our session today, we're going to do things a little bit short. So now if you move this full screen, you can see what this data visualization looks like full screen. You see how it fits in nicely in the full screen because I sized it properly. I can also use the cool little filtering features that I did before. Look at that. For like Benin or Botswana, it will be able to select and be interactive and show cases over time. It's all adding, it's all doing that analysis work behind the scenes. Now, by default, everyone in the world can see my visualizations on Leaders of Africa's profile. But if you're working on something, say, as a draft, and you don't want everyone to see it, what you're going to need to do is click on this little gear button and say, and toggle off Show on Viz Profile, and then toggle off Allow Access. That means it's going to become hidden, right? So, for instance, it's now hidden, and I can add some details down here for my visualization so that if I am publishing it online, that's there, and it also gives details to the public about it. Let's go to my portfolio here. You can see that I've got 5 that are hidden because this is our demo account. So, it's not an account where we're publishing on behalf of Leaders of Africa, for instance, the Institute. So you can see how, my project is here. I'll look at this example project. This is another derivation of what we just did here. But I'll notice one other thing here. In this one that I've combined the two axes together to have both new cases as well as deaths together. This is what we call dual axis, and these are synchronized axes, so it looks like this. So you could tell me which one looks better. I like this one. This one's pretty good, although I really like the one that we did today. That was just a little demo one here, because I think it's a little bit better in terms of the spacing of our ones, although dual axis may be more appropriate here if we can't expand out the kind of crunch these line graphs here. All right. So this is Tableau, and this is only an introduction that we can get through in just 90 minutes. So let me take a look. Let's see if somebody said they had a one. James has shared one here. He was doing a Tableau dashboard who shared in the question and answer figure. So we see a lot of good things here, but I'll just point out a few things, James, for you to think about. Number one, we got to think about that spacing. We have to create that spacing in a way that is visually pleasing, and we have to change all of our variable names to be actual nice variable names. You see how this is client underscore destination changed? We want to change that to client destination, right? Because we're not displaying this data dashboard as some unpolished version of our data. We want it to be as polished as possible. So if we go back to our example here, we could see everything says new date, new deaths, for example. Everything is nicely labeled in a way that is seen there. And in Tableau, you can change the label names such that that works. All right. So we are up against time. So let me share that opportunity I shared at the very beginning to apply for the fellowship at the Leaders of Africa Institute's Data and Design Program. This is a fellowship that is offered every year, and I really strongly encourage you to apply. I'm going to put the links in the chat to the application, as well as all Leaders of Africa's link, and I'll be also sharing my LinkedIn in just a moment as well. But I encourage you to apply, because if you want to learn more about Tableau or these other softwares, in this case of this program is going to last a few months, as well as a mentorship that you receive in actually creating a capstone project. So this isn't about just doing basic worksheets or activities in these data visualization platforms. At the end of this program, you are actually crafting your own capstone project that you propose at the beginning of the program, and you receive one-on-one mentorship on that project, as well as the course curriculum that we offered in the same format that we do today. That means live and synchronous. So this isn't a self-paced program. This is a live synchronous program, just as we do today, where we get to know each other. In fact, one of our attendees today in today's session was one of our fellows a couple years ago, and that's Ezra, who's joining us from Kenya. So I want to encourage you to apply. Applications are open for the fellowship until January 15th of next year. There are some full impact scholarships that will be given to attendees for the conference, so please note that. But even if you are not given a full impact scholarship, everyone does receive a scholarship that covers 95% of the course of the program as well. So we're able to offer that through our scholarships here at the Leaders of Africa Institute. So I want to encourage you to apply. Some of you have already applied, so I want to encourage you to do that. So with that, I'll take any questions in the chat after we conclude today, but I do want to say thank you to the Africa Digital Skills Conference, and particularly Mobile Web Ghana, and in particular Florence and her team at Mobile Web Ghana for hosting this wonderful digital skills conference. It is our pleasure here at the Leaders of Africa Institute to support this program and this conference for the third year running, and we hope to do so next year as well. And we also want to encourage all of you to connect with us through the channels I shared in the chat. If you have any questions for me or want to connect, my LinkedIn is there, as well as the Institute's website address, which I am now sharing in the chat. So with that, I want to thank you for a wonderful session and engaging with us. I want to wish you a healthy, happy, and healthy rest of your day and evening. Take care, and bye-bye.